Another week has gone by. Is it Thursday already?
It's Wednesday.
No, it's Thursday, but that's okay. Yeah, Steph, welcome. I'm Michael Barbaro. Welcome to another episode of For Real. I'm here with my co-host, Stephanie.
Hello, everyone.
So today I want to talk about. I'm gonna use a little privilege here and talk about just something we encountered our brokerage over the weekend. So I'm going to save a little bit. I'm going to take up a little bit of time and talk about that. Some of the things that people have been asking about, though, are escalation clauses. So I had someone inquire about that. What is an escalation clause? My agent told me not to take an escalation clause. Why would I not take an escalation clause? Why would I want an escalation clause? We're going to get to that. But first, I want to talk about the experience that we had with one of our agents. I don't even want to say over the weekend because it was like a 3 or 4 day thing, right? It was multiple times. So we've mentioned this in the past when we were talking about listings and we were talking about when you're selling your property. And look, I think it's wonderful if your listing agent, if your agent that's working to sell your house offers to be at every showing, right? But we also said,
You do?
don't let it. I don't, but I know a lot of agents. That's their value, and I don't really want any agents mad at me. But if you're going to do that, don't be an impetus to the showings. So we had a client that wanted to see a property, and look, I get it. Some of these agents are really, really busy. And, if everybody wants to see something on Saturday morning, you could only be in one place, and maybe you have assistants, whatever the case might be, but we could not get our client into the property. And so this is a client that came through us through Realtor.com. Was not really happy because didn't understand if a house is on the market and he offered 3, maybe 4 times to see it, and it was just not available from the agent. And so, look, if you're going to do that, if you're going to offer that, concierge service to your client, make sure you get the people in. It's not doing them any justice. It's not doing them any service.
Well, the buyers already have their own schedule that they have to confine to. So they have their limited schedule. They're obviously not available 100%. And then the listing agent has their own schedule, and trying to get that to match up at a time that's convenient for the listing agent is not really ultimately benefiting the client.
Right. You're adding another person to the mix, essentially, right? So I'm the buyer's agent. Let's say I have to figure out what's good for my buyers. Our schedules align. We coordinate our schedules. You have to make sure that the owner can get out of the property. And now you have to add a fourth dimension to this, a fourth element, which is, well, can the agent be available to come and show you the property? I get it. We believe if you're listing your house, this is my advice. If you feel otherwise, if your agent thinks that they have a better process for you, we use a product in Connecticut. We use a product called Showing Time. Showing Time is an app. This is how we as practitioners schedule appointments to go see listings. It's how we communicate with the seller's agent. So we put in a request via the app to show 123 Main Street on Saturday at 2 p.m. And the listing agent can respond to us. They can decline it. They can accept it. They can make us a counteroffer.
The sellers can too if you add them.
And that's what we do. So we do add all our sellers to that app. And so when I, as the listing agent, receive a request from a buyer's agent, simultaneously, my sellers are seeing the same thing. And so we believe in our firm that that's the right thing to do, right? Our clients should see it. We have to get their approval anyway. They're the ones that need to get out of their house. So for us, it's full transparency. It's just simple. Some agents see it otherwise. They say their value is to field those calls and then call their client up and then ask their client and then come back and then reach out to us. I mean, it's something that can be handled directly by the client. I don't know. Do we have any complaints? I think our clients largely appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I've never heard anybody complain. And me just personally, having to pick up the phone to confirm an appointment when I can get it instantly just doesn't seem beneficial to me as a person.
And there's also still some offices that don't even, right? So what I just described was an agent, listing agent, seller's agent that uses Showing Time but doesn't add their sellers to the app so that they're being notified. That's one level down. Another level down is the brokerages and the companies or the teams that don't use Showing Time at all. They want you to call the office and say, or contact them on their cell phone and say, I would like to show the property Saturday at 2 o'clock. And then they're going to reach out to their client and ask their client and then call us back. And We love hearing that. That's wonderful. When you read that in the listing, it says no, we don't use showing time. The good news is I'm hearing more and more people. We have much higher use of showing time, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Yep.
My unsolicited advice to sellers is, if you're going to have an agent that's going to show every property and you see that, show every potential buyer to your house, and you see that as valuable, just make sure you're having the conversation about, but if it becomes an impetus to someone to come and look at my house, because as far as I know Jake's here in the studio and he can give me a nod. As far as I know, we never got into that property, and our client was pretty disgusted. He's shaking his head no. So our client was pretty disgusted. It didn't help us with our client either. It makes us look bad. But also, who knows? That could have been the offer, right? That could have been that client could have been a cash offer with the highest offer, with the fewest terms and the fewest contingencies, and you just never know.
Well, something else to mention is that we also use the electronic lockbox, which is secure, accessed by agents. We can see when it's opened. So it's not like you're just putting a combination lockbox that anybody can enter to get into your home. It's just another extra measure we take when we're not able to be at showings.
Yeah. Right. So we all have the ability, provided, of course, that your agent is also using electronic lockboxes or electronic key boxes, which is definitely more secure. And sometimes I get it. Sometimes if you're in a market area where other agents don't have don't pay for that monthly fee for the application so that you can access those key boxes, then that becomes an impetus. But these are all things that sellers should be proactively asking. Look, what happens? Great, you're going to be here. What happens if you can't be here?
Right.
I mean, if you're going with the best agent in your area because you believe that's to your advantage, and they have 5, 6, 15 other listings, you have to ask, what happens if you're at one of your other 15 listings, or 5 listings, or 6, or whatever, or the other one? So
And hope that they don't say, well, we'll make them work around our schedule so that they can get in.
Because they rarely do.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that was probably the most interesting to me. I mean, there's a lot of things that when I went from being a developer to being a real estate broker, was that people will want to see a property, but if it's difficult to get in, they'll just move on. And something as unique as a home or a property, you would think that people would just come back and tolerate whatever kind of inconvenience it was to get in, right? It's not like you can, if you're buying a car, you can go to a different dealership in a different town and buy the same car. This is a very unique property, and that is, that is a characteristic of real estate, is uniqueness, right? So it's an interesting dynamic. So have that conversation with your agent. If your agent is offering that service, have that conversation and make sure you're getting the most exposure for your property. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with some of our viewers' questions, not my ranting. Be right back. All right, we're back. And now that I'm done with my rants, and before I start, just want to remind everybody you can contact us here at the station at 4real@WTNH.com. That's the numeral 4, real, at WTNH.com. If you have additional questions for us, or continue to hit us up on LinkedIn, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We actually, we've had some viewers ask about escalation clauses. So I think we should talk about what they actually are and your options that go along and how they actually react in the market right now, and maybe even talk about how they were in COVID too, when they were more prevalent.
So it's interesting, right? Escalation clauses, how do they affect both buyers and sellers? So typically a buyer is the one that's going to make that decision. And let's talk about
let's talk about what an escalation clause actually is.
Okay. So an escalation clause is a provision in the contract that a buyer can put in to say, so let's say a house is on the market for $500,000, and the buyer wants to place an offer, and their offer is $490,000. They can also add a provision in there that says the buyer is willing to increase their purchase offer, their offer price, in increments of 2, 5, 10,000,
whatever amount they
choose,
choose,
up to a maximum amount. And what that does is, so they're saying if you get another offer, so we're offering $495,000, I think I said in my example. If someone else offers $500,000, we're willing to beat that offer by whatever our increment is, up to a maximum price. And here's what that translates into for me. I find that people are willing to pay for a house. They're just scared to overpay. And what does overpay mean, right? Are you paying more than the sticker price? Or are you paying more? You're paying more than other people. Buyers don't want to pay more than what other people are willing to pay.
Right. That's what market value is, essentially.
And that's what market value is. What is a ready, willing, and able buyer willing to pay for a property in what's called an arm's length transaction, right? They don't have to have that house because their grandmother lives next door or whatever. So buyers like that option because they don't have to go in and overpay. Now, does that work in every instance? No. There are instances where I think that's a perfectly good solution. I think the increments have to be meaningful, right?
Especially if you're, you don't necessarily know, but if you're up against cash offers, going $3,000 above a cash offer might not be enough of an incentive to the seller.
Right. But we've had very good luck with them. Sometimes sellers' agents don't love them.
Oh yeah, there was a whole period.
Right.
It was on every listing, no escalation clauses.
Right. People just didn't like the escalation clauses for whatever reason. Oh, they're difficult. What happens if we have 2 escalation clauses? It's
meaning how do you compare what the ultimate final price is for that offer between 2?
Right, and the price is going to go up automatically, right? You're going to agree that you will increase your price. Can they be confusing? Sure. Like what happens if in my scenario, we offered $495. We're going to go up in increments of $5,000, not to exceed $520,000, right? If someone offers $519, do I lose or do I go up by $1,000 to my maximum, right? Instead of my full increment of $5,000, there's only $1,000. Does my price go up? Look, it doesn't have to live and operate on its own and function on its own. It basically shows the intent that a buyer is willing to say, I am willing to pay more money for this property. I am willing to go over and above someone else's offer. And that could work out very well for a seller.
Yeah. Especially, you'd probably only use this in a multiple offer situation, but you certainly can submit if it's not one, especially if they're expecting any other offers, just to show them. But you are also at the same time letting the seller know that you're willing to come up to this amount, but you're only willing to come up to this amount. And this is probably where you're going to go next, talking about the seller perspective on it.
Sure. And look, the other part of this is there are times when we advise our clients that it's probably not beneficial. We advise our clients, go in with your best foot forward, go in with your highest price, that you won't be upset if you lose the bid, because they can be confusing and they can be kind of nebulous. And so a lot of agents don't want to try and figure it out. Some agents tell you up front, we don't want that. As you said, there's other mitigating factors and terms that might make a difference. And so put your best foot forward in some cases. Right. In some cases, they work really well. But as a seller, right, and as a seller's agent, we're never going to preclude someone from bringing us that type of an offer because we understand what's associated with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why would you want to turn down any offer, especially when you're seeing what that buyer is ultimately willing to come up to? Why would you not want that information?
Sure. Right. And what are they ultimately comfortable coming up with? Mm-hmm. Now, if it's written properly, it's going to say, right, we are willing to raise our price in this increment over any bona fide offer, meaning it has to be a legitimate offer, right? It can't just be, your neighbor told you if you don't sell it, he'll give you $510,000. It has to be an offer in writing, something that can be verified. Obviously, the personal information is redacted. So it can absolutely work in your favor. It could absolutely be there. And from the seller's perspective, you might be able to get significantly more money for your property because a buyer feels more comfortable with that. So our rule of thumb, don't rule them out. Obviously, you're going to have that conversation with your own agent. Your own agent is likely you're going to find agents out there that believe we are 100% wrong on this and that you should never do it. You're going to find people that think you should always do it. But my experience has been, and we talk about this a lot, we have a flipper client that we work with, and I may have mentioned this in a previous episode, but when he is at a sidewalk Saturday morning auction and he is seeing the other bidders on the other side of the table. Keep in mind, our system is a closed bid system. You don't know what anybody else is bidding, right? It's not like you're bidding up something on eBay or one of the auction sites. So that fear of knowing. So this guy is a very sophisticated buyer, buys 15 houses a year. But if he gets a house, he's like, how did I get it that easily? Did I overpay for that house? So he would prefer to be at one of those sidewalk auctions and be open. See, someone is willing to pay another $5,000. I'll go higher. He's not bidding. I've been with him. He's not bidding in $100 increments. He's willing to pay $5,000 or $10,000 more to get someone else out of there. It just helps him feel better about the purchase to know that there are other people willing to pay for this house, and it helps him feel more confident in what he's going to purchase and ultimately, renovate and resell.
Well, I don't know if you have any other viewer comments or questions you wanted to talk about, but I think we're gonna take a quick break, and then I think we should spend some time talking about dual agency and even designated agency. I think we've touched on this previously, but let's dig back into it and give everybody a little more information on it.
Yeah, so the question was about specifically designated agency. We've touched on dual. Maybe we'll spend a little bit of time on dual and designated and what exactly that means. So let's take a break and we'll come right back. We are back.
Welcome back.
Where are we going? What are we talking about?
We're going to talk about dual and designated agency. Not sure if anybody really knows what it is, but it's when a brokerage represents both parties in the transaction. And then let's explain what the difference is between those two options.
Sure. All right. So dual agency. It's a little bit different depending on the size of the firm you are, right? So we're a small brokerage firm. And so we have a little more close relationship. And it harkens back to the days when all agents went into an office, right? So if you went into an office every day and you were one of 20 agents in an office, you would see the paperwork from the listing. You knew things about the listing, right? And so what dual agency is if a brokerage firm represents, so I'm the broker, our agents. If one of our agents, agent A and agent B, one represents a seller and then one represents a buyer interested in placing an offer on that property, theoretically, we are dual agents. I am a dual agent. We don't necessarily believe in dual agency. We don't like to practice dual agency because what it does is it says, I just become transactional, right? I can't give any advice. So how much should we offer for this property? Do you think we can offer less? Do you think we should offer more? We can't give any advice.
Well, and the reason for that is because you're representing the other party. So how can you represent both parties when you're telling the buyer to go in at a certain price when the seller is going to want more? So it's just not physically possible to be able to represent both parties
and
well.
I have this argument a lot with agents. Like, yes, it's possible. And I'm like, I don't know that it is possible.
Right.
Like, I think there's a certain degree of bias always. Maybe it's just simply you just have a longer relationship. Like, you've been listing the property longer, so you have that relationship with the people. Maybe you sold them the house. And then here comes someone that you find online. And look, I want to be clear. A lot of agents try and get right to that buyer, to that seller's agent, right? So we're a Zillow Premier brokerage. We buy leads from Zillow, and a lot of those leads that come in, they want to get to the buyer's agent.
To the listing agent.
I'm sorry, to the listing agent, to the seller's agent, because the market is so competitive that they think, well, if I can get right to the buyer's agent, to the seller's agent. I don't know why I keep saying that. If I can get right to the seller's agent, then there's an incentive in there for them to represent both sides of the transaction. Maybe they'll make more money. Maybe they'll want me to be the successful bidder on that house. But let's just understand what it is. It actually means if I represent you, me being the brokerage, and my agents, and you choose dual agency. By the way, in Connecticut, you have to consent to that. Both the seller has to consent to allow the brokerage to be a dual agent, and the seller has to consent, and the buyer has to consent to allow the brokerage to be a dual agent. If you have the consent of both those parties, then you can represent them, but you can't give any advice. And I want to be clear. If your buyer says, what do you think I should offer on this property? How much you think? I mean, you have to say, I can't offer you any advice, but whatever you come up with, I will present to the seller. And then they come up with something by talking to their friends or their mechanic or their uncle who used to be a realtor. And then we bring that offer to the seller. And then the seller says, well, what do you think? Can we counteroffer? Should we counteroffer? Do you think we can get them to do this? And we have to say, well, no.
Can't help you with that.
I can't help you, but whatever you tell me, I'll bring back to them. I'm not sure at what point then we bring any value, because we are absolutely giving our clients, we have a fiduciary to our clients. So when we are representing either the seller or the buyer, we are giving them the benefit of our experience. We're giving them the benefit of our strategy. And so we believe that dual agency is something you necessarily need to stay away from. Now, if you're an agent out there and you're telling me no, 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 then I'm telling you you're not doing it properly.
Right. Yeah,
Because
you're not doing it
you
by
are
law.
not supposed to give any advice. You are precluded from giving that advice. Okay.
Well, let's talk about designated agency. It's a form of dual agency, effectively, because the broker is still the same for both parties. But you get to designate one agent within the brokerage to represent either party, and it gives you a little more flexibility.
Right. And that's what this question was specifically about. What is designated agency? So in designated agency, same scenario. I have agent A that works for my firm and agent B that works for my firm. Agent A is representing the seller. Agent B brings a buyer. I, as the broker of record, am a dual agent. So I have that fiduciary where I can't say anything. But the two parties, I as the broker, I can designate A to represent the interests, the individual interests of the seller, and I could also designate agent B to represent the individual interests of that buyer. Of course, the buyer and seller both have to agree to that.
Right.
But then you can get that kind of representation. Now, what happens is you're precluded from sharing anything that you've known before that relationship started, that designated relationship. So you can't say, hey, by the way, before I started to represent you in this, I know that they have to sell because they're leaving town for a job or whatever the case might be. So anything that you learn prior to that is confidential, but you can offer advice. You can offer strategic advice or just the benefit of your expertise.
Yeah, just pricing opinions and contract strengths.
This is not going to be popular with agents. Agents love dual. Many of them do, but I also talk to many that say they don't do it. I have colleagues that I work with, and through leadership, that they say they just don't do it. Right? They'll refer them to someone else, and it's also somewhat nebulous. Right? If you're working with a big company, one of the big brands, who might have, 40 offices across the state. Is it realistic? I mean, if they have an office in, the eastern part of the state and then one on the New York border, is it any different than being two different companies? But still, you would have to follow that. It would still be considered a dual agent at the brokerage level, and then or designated agent between the agent on the east side of Connecticut versus those on the New York border. So
that means for some buyers going into this designated agency situation where they consent, it's really not much different for them than two separate brokerages. They just still have to consent to it so that they understand.
Right. And make sure that consent comes up front. So a lot of times you're going to see that consent in your original representation agreement, right? So if someone signs a representation agreement with a buyer, in there it's going to say, you understand that we represent other people and we may be in a dual agency situation. So typically the buyer would sign that and consent to that. Similarly, a seller will have the same thing in their listing agreement. However, the law requires that you have specifically named who the parties are. You wouldn't know that you were going to be a dual agent. Not likely. In some cases you might, but you may not know that at the beginning of the time when you list the property, or the beginning of the time when you're signing up with a buyer, with a buyer's agent to be a buyer's agent as a representative. So you don't always know what that's going to be. So even if you have that in your agreement, when it comes to the point where there's an event that triggers it, or you have an instance where it is dual agency, you then have to get that consent again. Identify the parties, identify the dates of the agreements that they have, and I understand the attraction to dual agency. Just make sure you understand it, and if you're informed and you make an informed decision and you decide to move forward, then that's the way it works. So, if you have more questions on this, we're happy to continue to talk about this stuff. And but once again, you could reach us at For Real at WTANX.com. Please use that, or you can find me on LinkedIn and Steph on LinkedIn, and shoot us your questions, and we will be back next week.
Look forward to hearing from you guys.